Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Guy Cousins. I'm a lecturer here at the University of Maine, Augusta in the Mental Health and Human Services Department. We've actually got a couple dynamic people here today to talk about something that I talk about in every class, but specifically in my introductory classes to substance use disorder, about language and the power of language. And we got Courtney Allen and Kayla Kalel. How'd I do? Good. Who are also members of Young People in Recovery Maine chapters. So give them your full attention. They've got a lot of great information to share. And once again, thanks for coming.
So as Guy said, my name is Kayla Kalel. I'm a student at University of Maine, Augusta on the Bangor campus in the Interdisciplinary Studies program. And I'm also co-chapter lead of Young People in Recovery Brewer.
And I am Courtney Allen. I am a student here at UMA as well. I study mental health and social justice in the interdisciplinary pathway. I am also the executive director of James's Place and a chapter leader for Young People in Recovery. We're going to go a little bit more into our story, but we're going to keep it surface for a moment. I do want to let you know that we're recording, so there's a little safe zone back there if you want to go back there and stay off camera. If you want to talk, Guy has a microphone that he's passing around. And I recognize that for some people, this may be a sensitive subject, so don't feel like you're pressured to talk.
Yeah, we really want this to be an open conversation too. So if you guys have something to contribute, absolutely raise your hand and Guy can give you the microphone.
All right.
So Young People in Recovery is a national grassroots organization for people in or seeking recovery from substance use disorder. We have chapters all over the United States. We do monthly workshops on recovery messaging, which is what we're doing today, housing, employment, education, advocacy, financial literacy. I believe we have 8 chapters in the state of Maine. And when we went to Washington, D.C. last May, Maine was the most represented state, so that was pretty awesome to be a part of. And I think the state of Maine won like 3 different advocacy awards as well. So we're definitely on fire here in the state for sure.
The other thing we do is all recovery meetings, which is a group setting for all people in or seeking recovery from substance use disorder, as well as our recovery allies, which you'll learn a little bit more about what that means. But all recovery meetings are for anybody from any pathway. So a lot of meetings you hear about are 12-step meetings or faith-based meetings. This is a place for all people to come together and talk about whatever it is going on in their lives that's affecting their recovery today. And in Augusta, ours is on Tuesday nights, which is tonight, so you're welcome to join us, from 5:45 to 6:45 at 9 Church Street. If you come there and you can't get in the door, you just have to ring the doorbell and somebody will come out and bring you in.
And our all recovery meetings in Brewer are at the Bangor Area Recovery Network, which is 142 Center Street in Brewer, from 6:30 to 7:30 on Tuesday nights.
Awesome. And then we also do chapter lead meetings where you can join us to host events or learn how to do this power presentation. We'll teach you, and then you guys can go out and do it. Or if, like, we've done candlelight visuals for overdose, people that we've lost to overdose, we've done all kinds of things. The chapter gets to decide. And then we also do pro-social events. So last week we went out and played kickball together. It was a lot of fun. And then we watched Recovery Boys. So think about getting involved, and this is a great first step.
So words have power. We all know that, right? This is a quote from William White. Words have immense power to wound or to heal. The right words catalyze personal transformation and offer invitations to citizenship and community service. But the wrong words stigmatize and disempower. The example I always give for this is I was taking a class called Labor Ready while I was incarcerated, and I had previously tried 2 different attempts at college and was not successful. I pretty much had decided that was not for me. And my teacher, her name was Abby, she continually breathed life into me, and she kept saying, you know, you're confident and you're good with your words, like you should really try going to school. And at first I just kept dismissing that. That was not, you know, something that I could do. And after a while, I started to latch on to this idea of furthering my education, even though my past told me I couldn't. And so I signed up for my first class, and after a while of putting in a lot of effort, I got a good grade on a test, and then I got an A on a paper. And after a while, I had finished a full semester of getting A's, and I just kept letting that trajectory take me forward, and kept letting those people that were saying positive things to me breathe life into me. So that's just, if we really do have power to change the trajectory of other people's lives. We just got to keep loving people until they're capable of loving themselves, which is true for my story.
So I have a kind of opposite side of this story. I grew up in a really small town in Maine. I think a lot of us did. But I also came from a family that was well known in that town for things that weren't great things. So I came from a family that was using substances, a lot of poverty and trauma involved in my childhood. But what I was known for when I walked in the door was that I was part of that family. And for a long time, people put labels on me that held me down. Things like, I'm not going to finish school, I'm just an addict, I wasn't good enough. And maybe nobody ever said those exact words, but those are the things that I felt when I was a young girl. And the next thing we talk about is when you identify as something, it becomes your identity. So for a really long time, those things were my identity. In sociology, there's this thing called labeling theory, where the more important a person is in your life that gives you a label, the harder it is to get that label to come off. So if a teacher had said to me when I was a young girl that I wasn't going to finish school, I put her in a position of power. So for a long time, I believed that I couldn't finish school. Does anybody have an experience in their life where they were labeled as something that was either good or may have kept you back? Do you want to share?
I actually have a very similar experience to yours. I grew up with emotionally abusive parents and was constantly told that I was not going to be able to do it. It ended in me putting off my education by 7 years before I was actually felt confident enough to come back to school.
Mm-hmm. We're really glad you came back. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So stigma, I'm sure you guys have heard this word before. Stigma is a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Stigma can reduce a person to nothing more than their difficulties, just like we just kind of gave those examples. It can lead systems to withhold appropriate services, which effectively changing stigma into discrimination when people do not have their needs met. Discrimination based on disability is illegal. Stigma robs people of possible opportunities and exposes people to preventative traumatic experiences. Does anybody have an example of a time when they feel like they've been stigmatized? I've experienced stigma in lots of different ways, but one is because of substance use disorder. We hear all the time on social media of that people thinking that people with substance use disorder shouldn't have their needs met because they made the choice, Or I've even been stigmatized in recovery. Sometimes when I first came into recovery, people would say, some of the people that were like long timers in recovery would say like, oh, I've drank more beer than you, I've spilt more beer than you've even drank, and it's really not up to other people to decide when someone's ready for recovery. I'm trying to think of other examples. You had one you wanted to share.
Yeah, one of my big barriers that I had to overcome with stigma was parenting and active addiction. For me, my substance use brought me to the point where my children were removed from my custody, and for a really long time, I had this underlying feeling that I wasn't good enough because the outside world kept telling me, how could you do this when you have children? And I mean, we can apply that to a lot of different situations, not just parenting and active substance. I was too close. We can apply that to a lot of situations, not just parenting and active substance use. But when somebody, this morning I started a war on Facebook this morning, on accident. I did not mean to. But like medication assisted therapy, that's not my pathway, but a lot of my friends, that's their pathway. And I experience stigma with them trying to even be a part of the recovery culture. Young people in recovery believes, you wanna?
My name is John. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I experienced a stigma, and another one of my good friends just recently did with a job. You apply for a job and they do a background check. Just because I have felonies in my past doesn't mean that's the man I am today. But they look at that and they won't hire me because they don't trust me. And that also happened to a good friend of mine as well just recently. So unfortunately, the stigma also, prevents further employment. So
That's a great example.
it happens all the time.
The one I like to exposing people to preventable traumatic experiences, especially people in early recovery. They're dealing with a lot of things, a lot of shame and guilt and pain with themselves on the inside. And then the outside world is throwing these stigmatized language at them and these more stigma and guilt. And here they are, already a person who experienced a lot of pain and not being accepted in their world. It's just more trauma we're adding to this person's life and making it even harder for them to find and sustain long-term recovery. Okay, so connotation. We're gonna go into a little activity here. Connotation is an emotional and imaginative association surrounding a word, a meaning given to a word through its use in a society or culture. So each of us have, when I say banana, what do you guys think of? You can just throw it out. What did you say? Oh, crap. Okay. Come on. When I say car, what do you say? Think. When I say book, what do you think? Okay. So most of the time that I said something, either you were thinking something different or you said something different than the person sitting next to you. So that's like the subtle cognitive meaning behind each word for you. And each person's is different. What these can do is create implicit biases. So when I think about a book, it may bring up an experience when I was a child in school and that teacher said that I couldn't do it. And then I've got this story rolling in my head, right? And when I think of my car, I am now thinking that my car needs new tires and they're going to be expensive and I don't have the money for them and so on and so forth. Anxiety all over the place. Okay, so now we're going to play with some words. Hold on. So we're going to do the connotations for addict, and don't feel like you're going to hurt my feelings. I've heard them all. Usually I just have people like blurt them out. Just blurt them out loud. Okay. Junkie. Oh, I can't spell, just so you know. Junkie. What? Bad mom. Hey, that's my favorite. How about welfare whore? Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Sorry.
Negative. So
Let's get a couple more. Me? Me. Yeah. So I also want to talk about in the 12-step culture, this word means something very, very different than what the outside world means. It means to them. Because in the 12-step culture, we understand as a unit that it means submission to our disease. It's a way of acknowledging and accepting that you can't use just one substance. And I recognize that, and in a 12-step fellowship with that identifies with this word, I use those words. So we can also, there are some good meanings, 12-step. Meaning. I pray every morning about this. Okay, so let's do recovery. I say recovery, you think whole,
getting better.
what? Peace? Oh, like peace, okay. Managing.
Worthy.
So process. What? Growth. Grateful. Work. Yep. Balance. Oh, I wish I could find that. Anything else? Ooh. Resilient. I think of recovery, I think of being a productive member of society.
Pays taxes.
We all like when people pay taxes. Ooh, respected and respectful. Respect. Pay taxes. A person. Oh, well, yeah. John's my friend on the outside.
Red ball is funny.
Okay. So when we talk about being an addict outside in the everyday world with those quote unquote normal people, these are some of the things that they could be hearing through their connotations and implicit biases. I don't believe that I am worthless. But for a long time, before I found recovery, I did. And those are the things that held me back from seeking treatment for a really long time. I knew when I was in active addiction that I was a bad mom because the world told me it every single day. So, and when we talk about recovery, this is what we're talking about. Okay, now what happens when we put the words together? We're talking about being an addict in recovery. So we have two different words with many different connotations. We have a junkie who is healthy. We have a bad mom who is in process. We have a whole thief. Oh, a whole thief. We have a shameful person who is drinking a lot of Red Bull. We have a liar who accepts it. A crackhead who is a productive member of society. Oh, we have a person not paying taxes, but they are paying taxes. What's happening here? What? So you get the point. We have a bum who is getting better. Let's do one more. When I talk about just a person.
Sister. Or mom.
Sister, mom, dad, friend. Oh.
Human being.
I don't mind helping a person with my tax money.
Yeah, me. Yeah.
Healing? Feelings. A person who feels. Human. They're a human being, beautifully broken. Couple more. Perfectly imperfect. A student. Ooh, they pay taxes. Employees. Employer. There's no limit. No limit to what a person can do. So when we're talking about ourselves and being in recovery, or talking about our family members who may be in recovery, now we have two different words with two different connotations. We have a flawed person who is in process, a flawed human being who is beautifully broken, but they're in process. We have a sister who is worthy. We have a student who is a productive member of society. We have an employee or employer who helps pay for our society by paying taxes. We have a respectable person who I want to help them grow. You get the point. This is not who you are. This is not who your family members are. This is what happens when somebody uses substances and experiences pain. Would anybody be willing to tell me if they're like in the early stages of recovery? 30, 90 days? I want you to rip this up. This is not who you are. This is who you are.
Makes me cry every time.
Perfectly imperfect over here. Okay. So Facebook, outside in the real world. Kayla is gonna try to throw out some stigmatized language at me, and I'm going to try to either change it or
Redirect the conversation.
redirect the conversation.
All right. Those junkies don't deserve our tax dollars.
Whoa, you mean like my sister who is a human being and what was I supposed to say? There was something I was supposed to say.
when we invest in people in recovery, they can in turn
Yes.
be community members that do very worthwhile things.
Yes. So when we invest in people with substance use disorder, they can become worthwhile community members. They go to school, they get jobs, they get better, they get their children back, and it's only a few tax dollars.
Medication-assisted treatment is just a crutch.
Well, there's many pathways to recovery, and each person's is very individualized and important to them.
How about, why do they deserve the help? They did that to themselves. Addiction's just a choice.
Substance use disorder is a disease, and there's 11 different criteria that get them there. And when maybe that first time was a choice, but once the brain changes, there's so much going on in there that it's no longer a choice. People experience withdrawal symptoms, they experience fear, they experience inability to get access to detox, and especially long-term treatment. What if they don't have Medicaid?
Good job.
So these are a bunch of different words that the left side is the words that we try to use, and the right side is the words that we try to stay away from. This is one I've been really working on lately, is resumption of use versus relapse, or how to set back or symptoms have returned.
I say reoccurrence of symptoms.
Yep.
And also, I don't know if it's up here, but Courtney was talking about how when people in the community that aren't necessarily been exposed to substance use disorder hear the word addict or alcoholic, I don't know if we mentioned that, literally they will, Courtney's going to talk about this later, but in several instances, they would be willing to give people less treatment just based on the language that we use. So if I were to say this person is an addict, they would 9 times out of 10 give less treatment than if I were to say this person has a substance use disorder. I mean, that blows my mind every single time I think about it.
And remember, each person has a different story. You never know what's going on in their outside life. They may have a daughter or a cousin or their mom that had a substance use disorder and had experienced things. And so that's bringing up that story they're telling us about who is standing in front of them.
So words that we want to elevate and celebrate.
People in or seeking recovery.
Recovery allies.
The recovery allies are the people that love the people in or seeking recovery. You guys are some of our strongest advocates and friends. Sometimes you have different positions in society where you get to talk about us differently and get to acknowledge with other people that don't have the, I think, fortune of loving somebody in recovery, and get to explain what that looks like and why it's important that we stop talking about our friends and our family members as addicts.
When we take out the us versus them language, we realize that we're all in this together, right? So then recovery-ready communities,
which we'll talk more about later. Growth and possibility.
Person-first language, which is kind of what Courtney was just talking about. Person in recovery, person with a substance use disorder.
And it expands even farther out from substance use disorder. Person with a felony conviction. Person who has experienced incarceration. Person who is on medication-assisted recovery, et cetera, et cetera.
Recovery is possible.
It happens. Not an end of the road thing. Do we have any recovery allies in the room? Would one of you mind helping us out and identifying, filling in the blanks for us? So my name is blank, and I'm a recovery ally, and what does that mean to you? You're the ally.
My name is Pat, and I am a recovery ally. And for that means support, encouragement, and love.
Woo! Do you have anybody else willing to be on the video? Sorry.
Hello? Okay, perfect. My name is Richard, and I am a recovery ally, and for me that means helping people remember that they are people.
Woo! Woo! Guy, want to do one?
Sure. My name is Guy, and I'm a recovery ally. And for me, that means being there at all times, not just the selected times, and making myself real while I'm doing it.
Woo! Woo! You want to try?
My name is Sue, and I didn't really know what that meant until I heard everybody else talking. But for me, it used to mean I don't want to do this. I didn't understand recovery. I mean, I didn't understand addiction. And because of people like you, I now do. Because of him, I now do. It's a long, hard road, but I'm here
And it is possible.
beside him, and that was my choice.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Thank you for coming out. All right. How about some people in recovery?
My name is Alicia. I am in long-term recovery. I'm also a recovery ally. For me, that means just empathizing with myself and knowing that when I was using, it was because there were emotions I had not learned how to process, and that was my way of dealing with them.
Woo!
My name is Samta, and I'm a person in long-term recovery. And for me, what that means is that I am worth the same as anybody else who is a person maybe not in recovery. And for me, that means I am a good mom. For me, that means I am an active member of society. For me, that means I am a positive friend. For me, that means all these great things that we came up with. It means so much. It means, that I am a person.
Have we done ours? We haven't.
No, go ahead.
My name's Kayla Kalel. I am a person in long-term recovery, and for me, what that means is mom and dad get their daughter back today. It also means that I get to be a student at UMA Bangor. I get to wear lots of hats in the community. I'm on the board of directors for James Place. I am on the Breastfeeding Coalition. My 9-month-old daughter, Trinity, who is out and about right now, will never, ever have to see me under the influence, which is so beautiful. Yeah. I almost cry every time I say it.
Woo!
My name is Courtney. I am a long-term recovery, and for me that means that today my children have a mother, my school has a scholar, and my community has an activist.
Woo!
So when we're talking out in the community, we really want to try to focus on that recovery story. They've heard all the things that we do when we're not in recovery. They don't get to see that up front, especially because it's all that community has been going on for so long, and there's absolutely a reason for that I completely identify with. But as we become coming out of age, I'm not anonymous anymore. We need to teach the communities about what recovery really looks like. We're not behind doors anymore. We're getting better. We're participating in healthy dialogue with our legislators, with our community members, with our professors, with the world at large.
Whoops.
And then a couple things I wanted to say really quick too is if you are part of a 12-step fellowship, you are not breaking any traditions by saying that you are a person in recovery. The only way that you'd be breaking a tradition is if you specified which 12-step community you were part of. So you're not breaking any rules by identifying as a person in recovery. And also, we use the term a person in long-term recovery, right? So there is no specific amount of time you have to be in recovery to be able to say that. When you decide you're in recovery, you're deciding that you're in it for the long haul. So even if today was my first day coming into recovery, I could still identify as a person in long-term recovery because I want this life. And we also talk about reoccurrence of symptoms. And if I did have a reoccurrence of symptoms, that doesn't mean that my recovery process has stopped, or stopped and started, stopped and started. You know, we're growing, we're learning every day. You just hop right back on the horse and keep going, you know? So I think that's important to remember.
I think that's really important too. And something I learned the other day, don't quote me on these dates or whatever, but Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, testified in front of the Congress back in the day about what it is to be an alcoholic. And if you're interested in that, I can find the testimony and send it over to you. He never identified as being the founding member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but he identified as being in recovery and talked to his legislators about what that means and what Alcoholics Anonymous can do for people seeking recovery. Also, I began identifying as a person in long-term recovery when I was 6 months in recovery. The other thing I talk about is that when you hear my story, my abstinence day and my recovery day are very different days. So my recovery journey began on February 8th of 2015. It is not my abstinence day, but it is the most important day of my story because that was the day that I began to change something. So you can have different days. Your recovery is yours and you can define it the way that you wish. So going back to the beginning where the labeling theory is, if you become what you identify as, then who do you want to be? Because it's your story. You get to choose. All right, so that was the fun part. Now we go into a bunch of research behind all of this. So in 2010, and I'd like to see a study done again now, but in 2010, there was a study done about what does the public think the underlying problem is for things like schizophrenia, major depression, and alcohol dependency. We have a baby. Her name is Trinity. And what they found was that most of the society, the highest level of the society, believes that bad character is the cause of alcohol dependency. I think we would be making a little bit of leeway on this by now.
Heck yeah, we are. So exploration of concepts. Substance use disorder is in the DSM-5 as of 2013, and it is a diagnosis based on evidence of impaired control, social impairment, risky use, and I always mess up this word, pharmacological criteria. The spectrum of disorders goes from mild, moderate to severe. And there are 11 criteria for substance use disorder. I'm not going to read through all of them, but this is available online if you would like to be able to look at it. There's one about... So this is a study that Kayla was talking about a minute ago. So there was 500 doctorate level clinicians, like not just normal people, not just lay people, people that went to school for a really long time to become a doctor, that were presented with a case. And they were presented with this case of a man that used substances for a few years. He's court mandated to treatment. The program requires him to be abstinent. You guys might know what program that is, but had complied with the treatment court requirements, 30 days, so he had a resumption of use. And here he is, he's presented as a substance abuser. And what was found was that when we presented this man as a substance abuser, clinicians were more likely to deny treatment, more likely to judge the person as deserving of blame and punishment. And if this is doctors, can you imagine the outside world that hasn't studied this? And then this was done all over again, and the person was presented as a person with a substance use disorder, and he received better treatment and more compassionate care. Studies right there. I can send you the link if you're interested. Just grab me at the end. Yeah, I think it's important to say too that the gentleman that Courtney and I used to present this with, when he was a child, he had a history of sexual trauma and physical abuse. So when he hears the word abuse, he always says he thinks of like his awful childhood, getting beaten and sexually abused. And so really it's important for us to take the term abuse out of substance abuse because, other people too will think of really negative things when they hear the term abuse. So substance use is the proper way to introduce that.
Like I personally have experienced domestic violence. That makes me think about when those things were happening to me.
All right, this is my favorite one. Exploration of concepts. Recovery. Recovery is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential. What really sticks out to me about that definition is that nowhere in that definition does it say abstinence. It doesn't say sobriety. So recovery, when you really think about it, every single person in this world is in recovery from something. Might be in recovery from childhood trauma, or the common head cold, or cancer, substance use disorder, a mental health, some type of mental health diagnosis, bipolar, schizophrenia. I mean, the list goes on and on. And the 4 pillars of recovery are health, home, purpose, and community.
Health, home, purpose, and community are my favorite thing ever. So health, home, purpose, and community are the 4 things that make up a good life in recovery. But let's think about it. Aren't those the same things that make up a good life in any life? Because health is overcoming or managing one's symptoms, or managing one's disease or symptoms, and making informed, healthy choices that support physical and emotional well-being. So being able to see a doctor when you're sick. Home, a stable and safe place to live. Everybody needs a safe home to go to when you leave work. I was just talking about this yesterday. We were talking about people who are homeless. And, I think we forget that being able to leave work, go home, grab a bag of groceries, and go walk through your door is actually like a privilege and something that not everybody has. Maybe they even have a place to live, but it's not safe, especially if they're in early recovery. Maybe they're living with somebody that is still in active substance use.
I always think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs with that. It's really hard if someone has a substance use disorder and they're, actively using still. It's really hard for us to expect them to achieve recovery if they don't have a place to live and they don't have a job, they can't support themselves. So it really is important for us to look at recovery as, the whole person. Make sure that they have employment and support and, all of those things.
Kayla just hit on purpose. So meaningful daily activities such as like a job, school, volunteerism, and the independence and income and resources to participate in society. So when people are either in active substance use or in early recovery, things like going to the movie theater is outside of their ability to pay for. To be able to participate in society means that we have like the kickball event. We do that all for free and make sure that people have things that they can be a part of. And then they need things that they're passionate about. For me, that's reading. For me, that's taking my kids for a walk. For me, that is studying. Actually, it's ridiculous, but it's what makes me happy. So everybody needs them.
Nerd alert.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. Community is relationships and social networks that provide support, friendship, love, and hope. People need friends, and sometimes, or family. For me, I have a recovery family now. I got to choose mine, and it's so cool. But these people are the ones that, on days that I'm not feeling like myself or I'm struggling with a personal matter, they hold me accountable and they bring me back into my society. Because for me, my substance use disorder is isolating, and I can lock myself in a bedroom for days on end and not reach out to anybody. And that phone feels like 100 million pounds, and I just can't break down the walls, but they'll show up. They'll be like, well, where is Courtney? Why haven't I heard from her in a couple days? And they'll be like, are you okay? And I've built relationships that with certain people, I can be like, no, I'm not okay. And they can be there and they can support me, and they're my family. So everybody needs a community.
So there's 8 pillars to a recovery-ready community. We have prevention, treatment, harm reduction, judicial and law enforcement, housing, education, employment, and recovery support. In a perfect world, a community would have all 8 pillars, and we would be able to support somebody in recovery no matter what side of the kind of spectrum that they're on,
So if they were looking for housing support, there would be ample amounts of recovery housing. Nobody would have to wait a day. If they were entering through the judicial and law enforcement, there would be diversion programs like drug courts in every county, family treatment courts in every county, and nobody would have to wait a day.
there would be harm reduction services, a needle exchange clinic. And I know that's a big one around here. But harm reduction is very important because not everybody is in a stage of change where they're ready for recovery today. And how do we support them in that pre-contemplative stage and keep them safe and not keep spreading hepatitis C? How do we engage with somebody where they're at, no matter what that means? And sometimes that means harm reduction services.
Yeah, if a person with a substance use disorder is utilizing harm reduction services, it increases their chances of entering recovery by seven times over, which is pretty significant.
I have a harm reduction story. So harm reduction was the first time that I was ever offered an opportunity at recovery. I found out that I was pregnant with my second son, and I was actively consuming heroin via IV. And when I found out that day, I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew logically that I needed to stop using substances, but I didn't know how. I had never been exposed to the recovery process. I'd never heard of anyone being sober. I come from a family that actively consumed substances, and that's just what we did. But I knew deep down that I wanted to stop using. And what I had been using, I had been going to the local needle exchange, which is on Green Street. If anybody needs that, I'll tell you where it's at. And I went there that day, and I said to the nurse, I said, you know, I'm pregnant and I really want to keep this baby, but I don't know how I'm going to keep this baby. And she said to me that she could connect me with a doctor and she could get me in tomorrow and that I could be given a prescription for Subutex. I didn't know what Subutex was then. But what she told me was that if I tried to detox on my own, that my baby could have really adverse side effects and I might lose it. So I didn't know this then, but this woman began my process of recovery in that harm reduction service. And I got on that Subutex and I had a baby that was born substance free 9 months later.
Woo! And if you're interested in learning more about the 8 pillars to recovery ready communities, you can go on youngpeopleinrecovery.org and it kind of lays everything out for you. Youngpeopleinrecovery.org.
Does anybody have any questions on this? What else? Education. Education. Collegiate recovery communities. Do you know a little bit about that?
I know that the first collegiate recovery in the state of Maine was in Portland at
USM?
USM, yes.
Yeah.
And they have an entire recovery community. It's pretty awesome. They do yoga and meditation. They have 12-step meetings, all recovery meetings, which I think in a kind of a college setting is really important because the dynamic of colleges generally is partying. So having an avenue for people that are in recovery is pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Right on campus. They have a little thing. I've never been up there, but it's I'm assuming a little area. A little area
It's called
where
the Rock.
The Rock. I want a rock. If anybody's listening, we need a rock at UMA. What else? Housing. I talked about recovery housing, which is also another community thing where people live together and hold each other accountable. Recovery support services, which are peer support specialists or recovery coaches. I'll put out a hint. There's a recovery coach training here this summer. But that's training people on how to support people where they're at and how to protect your own recovery while you support other people. Education, prevention. I don't do a whole lot of prevention work. Kayla, have you ever done any prevention work?
Yeah, I'm trained to go into schools and talk to kids about tobacco safety. We go, our chapter of YPR goes in and talks to students about not using substances. I guess it's going to kind of take the place of the DARE program, but actually be evidence-based to work and not just be don't do drugs. Have people have students make choices that will fulfill the dreams that they have and not go against those.
Awesome. I did hear a cool statistics the other day is that if you quit smoking cigarettes when you also quit substances, you're more likely to succeed with both. Don't quote me on that because I don't have the link for it. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
I wish I had quit cigarettes.
Okay,
Nice.
good job.
I just switched to the dual, trying one step at a time.
So the guiding principles of recovery. The following principles provide a philosophical and conceptual framework for all who have been diagnosed with mental health and/or substance use disorder. The principles guide us as we move towards the belief and reality that recovery is possible. Guiding principles of recovery. There are many pathways to recovery.
Many, many, many pathways. As many people as there are in recovery, there are that many pathways. Recovery is supported by peers and allies.
Recovery is self-directed and empowering.
Recovery emerges from hope and gratitude.
Recovery involves a personal recognition of the need for change and transformation.
It involves a process of healing and self-redefinition.
Recovery can be holistic.
Recovery involves addressing discrimination and transcending shame and stigma.
Recovery has cultural dimension.
Recovery involves rejoining and rebuilding a life in the community, or recovery involves just joining and building a life in community.
Recovery exists on a continuum of improved health and wellness.
But most importantly, recovery is a reality. It can, will, and does happen. There you go.
Does anybody have any questions? We have a few minutes.
I can just stand up here for 10 minutes. like that moment of pause at a meeting where they're like the
That
second
awkward moment.
Yeah, second moment of silence.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your rock bottom when you chose, okay, this has to stop? What, if you don't mind me asking.
So when I talk about my recovery, it wasn't really a rock bottom, but it was a moment that I decided that something needed to change. And for me, that was on February 8th, I woke up and I woke up from a blackout, and I remember the sun coming in through the light, and it just really hurt my eyes. And I remember a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for what I did the night before. And I remember that I didn't know where my children were. I had a nanny at the time that lived with us. She's lived with us for 10 years. And when I came to, I walked up over the stairs to their bedroom, and I heard them playing inside. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the shame and pain in their eyes was the same ones that I had experienced as a child. And I call this my moment of clarity. And I checked myself into a detox that day. And I often wonder, because this is what I see happen in my community today, is that what if that detox had said no to me that day? Because that was my moment that I was ready. I was so ready and so broken and so much shame. If that detox had said no, I don't think I would be standing here with you today. Luckily for me, and I talk a lot about how my story is one of luck, and it should never be this way. But luckily for me, I got into that detox that day. And luckily for me, my sister called the child protective workers, and my kids were removed from my custody. And they were placed into a safe home and gave me the time and the space to get better. I got access to a family treatment court so when I was talking about those labels that were applied to me as a kid, this was the first place that somebody called me Courtney and said, Courtney, what do you want to do with your life? You're not just this person that you used to be. And that blew up my whole world, because when somebody has gotten to the point where they have something called recovery capital, where they have no more family, no more friends, no more anything of those outside things that we think are good, but they also have no more effort left inside them. That's called recovery capital bankruptcy. And that's where I was at. And when that happens, somebody has to show us a top. It has to show us that something is possible. And that's what family treatment court did for me. And a year later, I was reunited with my children, full custody, and I began here at UMA. And education's been really important to me to get out.
Yes, definitely. I don't know. I don't really. I wish that there was an aha moment where I just the skies opened and I realized that I needed to. I mean, I throughout my 10 years of lived experience, there were a lot of times where I really realized that I needed to get help. And I think that probably where I was able to put the most effort into my recovery was when I was sentenced to 3 years in prison. And it sounds like it was kind of my first surrender, where even though I was petrified to go to prison, I still had this kind of like clarity because I knew I didn't have to chase drugs anymore. Like it was out of my hands. You know, it was my first real surrender. Like I have no control anymore. I just have to let go. And that's what I did. And then I poured my heart and soul into recovery while I was in there. And there's not a lot of supports within the walls as far as treatment. There's in the state of Maine, there's an abundance of women being sentenced to prison. So they're really overpopulated. They're sending women out to different county jails and things. But we were able to have meetings just with just the people that were incarcerated. So we were able to kind of find recovery, which was really beautiful. Yeah.
Last minute burning desire question. Okay. So our contact information is up here. I go by courtney.elizabeth.allen@maine.edu and Kayla Kalel at Gmail.
KaylaMKalel@gmail.com or Kayla.Kalel@maine.edu.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Oh, yeah. So tomorrow, the Mental Health and Human Services Club is also hosting another event, same time, same place, with an arcane training offered by Bailey at the Maine General. Yep.